All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going deep with the Dark Angels.
Yeah, the Dark Angels.
And you've brought some really interesting excerpts
I have.
from Angelos Oscuros, Historia, Organización y Acciones Notables.
It's coded title.
It is. And I gotta say, just glancing through this, I'm already sensing
Oh, yeah.
these guys are, well, they're not your typical Space Marines.
You could say that.
More than a little mysterious, wouldn't you say?
Well, they are known for their loyalty to the Emperor, of course.
Right. Every Space Marine chapter's got to have that, right?
Yeah, but the Dark Angels, they carry a kind of a burden of guilt
Oh.
and shame that really shapes everything they do.
Okay, so this isn't just another good guys in spaces story.
No, definitely not.
So it sounds like there are some skeletons in the power armor closet.
You could say that. To really understand the Dark Angels, we need to go
Back
back
to the beginning.
to their origins. They were the first Legion,
Oh, wow. So before even like the Ultramarines and all those guys.
Yeah, the prototype for all Space Marines.
Top tier from the start.
Absolutely.
So reading through these excerpts, it doesn't sound like they were always the grim, secretive figures we see later on, in the 41st millennium.
Yeah, early records actually describe them as more knightly even.
Really?
Almost flamboyant in their fighting style.
That's not the image that comes to mind when I think Dark Angels.
No, not at all. But there are even accounts of them fighting alongside
Wait, fighting alongside who?
Constantine Valor himself during the Unification Wars.
Hold on, the Emperor's Captain General.
The one and only?
And the First Legion, side by side. Talk about an all-star team.
That's one way to put it.
So if they weren't always so dour and secretive,
Hmm?
where did that shift come from? Was it Caliban, their homeworld?
Caliban plays a huge role.
Okay, but how so?
Well, it wasn't your average planet, more of a death world.
Ah, that explains the fighting prowess for sure.
Yeah, where knightly orders constantly battled these monstrous creatures.
Survival of the fittest taken to a whole other level.
Exactly. And that harsh environment, it really shaped their culture.
Right, but what about the secrecy? Because that's not exactly a knightly virtue, is it?
No, that came later, and it's tied to their Primarch, Lionel Johnson.
Ah, of course, the lion.
Who was discovered on Caliban, of course. He led them to even greater victories during the Great Crusade.
But I have a feeling there's a but coming here.
There is. Their greatest shame also originates there.
It's got to be connected to the fallen, right?
It is. The fallen are at the crux of their story. It all stems from the betrayal of Luther, Lionel Johnson's closest confidant.
Betrayal at the highest level.
You could say that. It goes beyond just a simple betrayal, though.
How so?
Luther actually led a rebellion against Lionel Johnson.
Wow.
And it culminated in this devastating civil war that shattered Caliban.
Wait, shattered?
Literally shattered the planet.
So whole planet was destroyed because of one guy's betrayal.
It's more complicated than that, but essentially, yes.
That's extreme. No wonder they're so secretive about it.
The destruction of Caliban is, it's their defining trauma.
I can't even imagine.
And they believe that capturing the fallen, all of them, is the only way to redeem themselves.
In the eye of the Emperor, you mean?
In the eyes of the Emperor, yes. And perhaps in their own eyes as well.
So their entire identity, it's built around this one event.
It permeates everything they do. Their actions, their distrust of outsiders, even their organizational structure.
Ah, now that's interesting. Most chapters stick to the Codex Astartes, like it's,
Like this gospel, yeah.
But not the Dark Angels.
They've diverged significantly.
How so? What makes them unique?
Well, they've actually retained certain formations
Really?
from their days as a full legion, like the Deathwing, for example.
Oh, yeah, the Deathwing.
They're composed entirely of Terminator-armored veterans.
So a whole company of, like, walking tanks.
Yeah, essentially. And they exist outside the normal codex structure.
So they answer only to the higher-ups. Talk about a power move.
It certainly is. And then you have the Raven Wing.
Oh, yeah, the Raven Wing, like a black-clad, super-fast strike force.
Exactly. Specializing in lightning attacks, they also operate outside the typical codex hierarchy.
So both wings are tied into this hunt for the fallen.
Deeply intertwined.
So they've built their entire chapter around this need for secrecy and redemption?
You could see that.
But how does it work in practice? Like, how does it actually play out?
It creates these, fascinating complexities.
Oh.
Their structure actually reinforces their internal conflict.
Oh, interesting.
You see, the Deathwing embodies their penitence for the past.
So, like, punishing themselves for what happened.
In a way, yes, while the Raven Wing embodies their obsessive pursuit.
Of the fallen.
Right.
It's like two sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
Reflecting this duality of their existence.
Perfectly put.
But how do they reconcile this with their loyalty to the Emperor?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't it, don't their actions sometimes conflict with
Oh, absolutely.
duties to the wider Imperium?
That is the million throne guilt question.
Right. Are they truly loyal, or does this guilt just, like, consume them?
To understand that, I think we need to delve into some of their notable actions.
Let's do it. Let's start with the Thramas Crusade.
Okay.
That brutal campaign against the Night Lords during the Horus Heresy.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't pulling any punches there, were they?
Not at all. The Thramas Crusade really showcases their strategic brilliance.
Oh, for sure.
And their ruthlessness.
Yeah, no kidding.
Lionel Johnson actually used this powerful warp jump artifact.
What was it called?
The T'Chulcha?
The T'Chulcha.
To decimate the Night Lord's fleet.
Wow.
It was a pivotal victory for the Imperium.
They were definitely thinking several steps ahead.
Always.
But I'm guessing it wasn't just about, like, tactical victory, right?
You're right.
Was Lionel Johnson already hunting for the Fallen, even back then, during the heresy?
There are whispers that he might have been pursuing his own agenda, potentially seeking information about the Fallen, even in the midst of, well...
the biggest war the galaxy had ever seen.
Exactly.
Talk about unwavering focus. But also maybe a bit reckless.
Maybe.
I mean, the heresy was a pretty big deal, even for the First Legion.
It highlights the tension at the heart of the Dark Angels.
Right, like were they truly committed to the Imperium's survival,
Or was their obsession already taking precedence?
Tough question.
It is.
It makes you wonder how much damage has that obsession caused.
A lot.
Were there other instances where their hunt for the Fallen just overshadowed their duties?
Plenty. But to understand the full scope of this, we need to dive into the most impactful event in their history.
Which is?
The fall of Caliban itself. The fall of Caliban, it's not just a historical event for the Dark Angels.
Right.
It's an open wound.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Imagine returning to your home world, only to find it consumed by this civil war.
Right.
That ultimately leads to its destruction.
That's got to leave a mark.
It does.
No wonder they're so haunted by it.
Yeah, exactly.
But how does this tie into their beliefs? How do they reconcile their actions with their faith in the Emperor?
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, how so?
On the surface, they embody the core tenets of the Imperial Creed.
Unwavering, loyalty, devotion to duty, all that.
Right. But for the Dark Angels, it goes deeper.
Oh.
Their faith is intrinsically tied to their shame over the fall.
So it's not just about, like, following orders, it's about atoning for their past.
Exactly. They believe that capturing the fallen...
One of them?
All of them is the only path to forgiving.
Forgiveness from?
From the Emperor, of course. And perhaps even more importantly, from themselves.
That makes their faith a lot more complex.
Oh, absolutely.
Than your average Space Marine chapter, wouldn't you say?
For it's almost like they've developed their own internal religions, you know?
Based on this obsession with redemption.
Exactly. Their rituals, their secrecy, their entire hierarchy, it all revolves around this central belief.
It binds them together.
It does.
And it fuels their actions.
Absolutely.
But how do they square this with the wider Imperium? I mean, the Ecclesiarchy, the High Lords of Terra,
right.
They're not exactly known for, tolerating deviations from the standard dogma.
No, not at all.
Let's just raise some eyebrows.
Oh, absolutely. That's where their secrecy becomes crucial.
So it's all smoke and mirrors.
In a way, they walk a tightrope, you see, publicly adhering to the Imperial Creed while privately pursuing their own agenda.
So loyal on the outside, obsessed on the inside.
It's a dangerous being they're playing.
No kidding.
But they understand the need for unity within the Imperium. But their hunt for the Fallen, it trumps everything else.
It's their defining purpose.
Exactly.
But their Primarch, Lionel Johnson, I mean, he's not around. He's not... a god they can turn to for guidance. So how do they justify their actions without his direct leadership?
That's where the reclusion comes in.
The reclusion.
It's a form of deep meditation, a ritualistic introspection.
Okay.
That allows them to connect with their inner selves.
Interesting.
With the spirit of the chapter.
So instead of seeking external guidance, they just turn inwards.
You could say that.
Seems a bit subjective, don't you think?
It is.
How can they be sure they're not, being misled by their own guilt and biases and all that?
It's a question that likely haunts them.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous path, one that could easily lead to fanaticism.
Which brings us back to this whole idea of redemption.
Right.
If they're constantly acting out of guilt and shame, can they ever truly achieve atonement?
That's the ultimate dilemma, isn't it?
It is. Are they genuinely trying to cleanse themselves, or are they just,
Or are they doomed to repeat their past mistakes?
Yeah.
It's a tragic cycle of violence and secrecy.
Fueled by an obsession that might never be satisfied.
And yet, it's also what makes them so compelling, Don't you think?
More for
The
sure.
Dark Angels, they're a study in contrasts,
Mm-hmm.
a chapter torn between duty and obsession,
Wait,
loyalty and
it's
betrayal.
like complex.
They remind us that even the Emperor's finest
Mm-hmm.
aren't immune to the temptations of darkness.
And that their flaws are what make them human.
Even if they're superhuman warriors,
Right.
their story is far from over, though.
Well, that's for sure.
As the Imperium faces new threats,
Mm-hmm.
the Dark Angels will, well, they'll continue to walk their shadowy path.
Forever haunted by the ghosts of Caliban.
Exactly.
So, after hearing all of this,
Mm-hmm.
why should our listener care?
That's a good question.
Why should the internal struggles of a bunch of secretive space marines
Right.
matter to us?
Because it reflects a fundamental truth about humanity, I think.
Even in this fantastical setting of Warhammer 40A.
Even in the 41st millennium, we're all shaped by our past,
Mm-hmm.
by the choices we make, the consequences we face.
The Dark Angels are an extreme example, sure.
They are.
But they remind us that even the most noble intentions can be twisted.
Absolutely.
That even those striving for righteousness can stumble and fall.
And their story serves as a warning. Be wary of those who operate in the shadows, demanding unquestioning loyalty and silence.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Because even in a galaxy consumed by darkness and war,
Right.
the most dangerous enemy might be the one you thought you could trust.
That's a chilling thought.
It is.
Speaking of trust and secrecy, let's talk about how the Dark Angels' unique organizational structure reinforces their secretive and unforgiving nature.
Sounds good.
That's where we'll pick up in the final part of our deep dive. So we've talked about their tragic past and their quest for redemption. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of their organization.
Right.
It's not your typical Space Marine chapter setup, is it?
Not at all. They've managed to retain elements of their original Legion structure.
Really?
Even while appearing to follow the Codex Astartes.
It's a delicate balancing act.
It is.
So for those of us who haven't spent years, poring over Imperial records, break it down for us.
Okay.
What are the key differences between a standard Codex chapter and the Dark Angels?
Well, a typical Codex chapter, it's organized into 10 companies,
right?
Each with specific roles and a clear hierarchy. The Dark Angels, however, they have those
specialized wings.
Yeah, the Death Wing and the Raven Wings.
Right.
And they operate outside this structure.
Okay, so the Death Wing with their Terminator armor and the Raven Wing, the speed demons on bikes.
Yeah.
They don't just answer to their company captain or whatever. They report directly to the top.
Precisely. The Death Wing, for example, they're not just a collection of veterans. They're seen as the embodiment of the chapter's penitence.
So like punishing themselves?
In a way, yes. Their unwavering commitment to atoning for the sins of the fallen.
Heavy stuff.
They're deployed only in the most dire situations. A hammer blow wielded by the chapter master himself.
Okay, and what about the Raven Wing? Are they just a fast attack force? Or?
They're more than just speed.
Oh.
They're the hunters, the seekers. They embody the Dark Angel's relentless pursuit of the fallen,
right?
Striking with surgical precision and vanishing before the enemy can even react.
So like two sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
Reflecting the Dark Angel's internal struggle.
It's a brilliant setup, strategically speaking.
Oh, for sure.
But I imagine it created its own set of challenges.
Oh, absolutely.
It highlights the tension between their oaths to the Emperor and their obsession with the fallen.
Right.
The Death Wing. They represent their guilt, their desire for punishment, you could say.
Right.
While the Raven Wing, they embody their relentless pursuit of redemption.
It's almost Shakespearean, this internal conflict playing out in their very structure.
Exactly.
But we haven't even touched on the inner circle yet.
Ah, yes.
They're the ones who really,
keep the secrets.
Hold the secrets close, right?
The inner circle is where the true power lies.
Okay.
It's composed of the chapter's highest-ranking officers, including the Supreme Grand Master himself.
Right.
They're the guardians of the truth about the fallen.
Okay.
The ones who make the decisions that shape the chapter's destiny.
So while the Death Wing and the Raven Wing are the muscle, the inner circle is the brain.
You could say that.
They're the ones pulling the strings, making sure the secrets stay buried.
They control the flow of information, deciding who knows what and when.
That's a lot of power.
It is.
Concentrated in the hands of a few.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like a recipe for disaster, doesn't it?
It's a valid concern.
I mean, who watches the Watchmen?
Right. Their obsession with secrecy has created this culture of paranoia and distrust even within their own ranks.
Makes you wonder.
It does.
What would happen if someone within the inner circle were to abuse their power?
Or what if they were wrong about the Fallen?
Ooh, good point.
What if their entire quest is based on a flawed premise?
That's a skimmy thought.
It is.
And it gets to the heart of what makes the Dark Angels so intriguing, doesn't it?
It does.
Are they ultimately a force for good in the galaxy, or are they, so consumed by their own demons that they've become a danger to the Imperium they're sworn to protect?
It's a question without an easy answer.
It is.
But before we get too lost in the philosophical weeds,
right.
Let's bring it back to our listener.
Okay, good idea.
What are the key takeaways here?
Yeah, what should they remember about the Dark Angels?
First and foremost, the Dark Angels are defined by their past.
Okay.
The fall of Caliban, the betrayal of Luther, the hunt for the Fallen.
Mm-hmm.
These events have shaped everything about them, from their beliefs to their organization, everything.
They're a study in contradictions, aren't they?
They are.
Noble yet ruthless, loyal yet secretive.
Mm-hmm.
Driven by both duty and obsession.
They embody the best and the worst aspects of the Space Marines.
Their unique organizational structure, it reflects their internal struggle.
Mm-hmm.
This constant tension between their oaths and their guilt.
It gives them incredible power and flexibility.
But it also isolates them.
It does.
And breeds distrust.
Their story is a cautionary tale, I think.
How so?
It reminds us that even the most righteous can fall, that secrets can corrupt even the noblest of hearts.
And it serves as a warning.
It does.
To be wary of those who operate in the shadows, demanding unquestioning loyalty and silence.
Because in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, the enemy you can't see is often the most dangerous.
Well said.
Thank you.
And on that note, I think we'll conclude our deep dive into the Dark Angels.
I think that's a good place to stop.
Keep those words in mind, listener, as you navigate the treacherous waters of the 41st millennium.
There are always more secrets to uncover, more layers to peel back.
Always more to learn.
Exactly.
And as always, thanks for